gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. So we have our semi-regular Roger Harris still substituting for Betsy Wells and Andy Dedman and myself, Mike Philbeck, but we have a guest that hadn't been here since before he was mayor of Kings Mountain the last time. Yeah. Scott Neisler, glad to have you back.
Glad to be here.
Served two stints as mayor, one when he was young, one when he was not so young.
That's right,
Scott?
that's right, yeah. I learned from my experiences, I guess, to
All
do
right.
it again.
Well, folks, if you've watched the news at all and been awake at all in Cleveland County and around the region this week, you know that there was more big news than the Aisha Degree disappearance from 25 years ago. On Valentine's Day was the 25th anniversary. Only 4 days later, law enforcement let it out that the week before they had gotten warrants for 3 cell phones belonging to Roy Lee Dedman and 2 of his daughters. I believe that would be Sarah and Lizzie. And Lizzie, I believe, lives in Texas, so they had to go out there for that. But you remember last September when they had the searches at multiple properties belonging to the Dedman family and got this back in the news. Shortly after that, a gentleman went to them that said he had been at a party with a couple of the Dedman sisters in the mid-2000s, and that in an intoxicated state, one of them blurted out, "I killed Aisha Degree," and her sister told her to shut the expletive up. And so they gave this gentleman a lie detector test, and he passed it. Then there are other texts we may get into, but this is a big, big change in what we've known, and there are all kind of text messages between the sisters that have been online. And I wonder, is this just another chapter in the long unsolved mystery, or are we pretty close to seeing some type of charges somewhere? Andy, we'll let you get us started. What you think's going on with these new developments?
Well, in full disclosure, everybody knows these are my cousins. And it's a burden for all of us. We hate that this is going on. We don't know for sure. I mean, everybody deserves their day in court, and everybody's innocent until proven guilty. Right. And this includes Roy and the 2 girls. We don't know the facts yet. We have a lot of supposition at this point. We have a lot of circumstantial evidence, so we just have to wait and see what it is. There's no doubt in my mind that Aisha Degree's family deserves closure with this. Sheriff Norman has made this a priority ever since he's been in office. He understands that this is something that is, no matter how long this thing has gone on, it's always somewhere in people's minds. It always is. I mean, when a child is missing like this, and people have to ask, what in the world was she doing out in the middle of the night like that in a storm? And there's all these questions that are out there. Why was she out there? Who got her? What happened? I mean, there are so many other questions that are out there that everybody's looking for answers, and there's somebody out there that's got the answers, but we just don't know yet. So I would just caution everybody, don't start having a jury in the public sphere. Let's wait, let the law enforcement do their job, and then let the court system do theirs.
Certainly, they certainly are presumed innocent until proven guilty. There's no question about that, and certainly the family needs. But Roger, among the many text messages, and I think you may be the first one to send me a link to the original ones from WBTV the other night. But one of them, for example, is where Lizzie Dedman Foster says to her ex-husband in a text on September 12th of last year, I don't know what to do. I caused this, talking about this whole mess with the warrants and them all being questioned. And it's just sad, but what's your take on what's happened this week?
It is, and you know, the cell phones contain what I think is colloquially known as messages of interest. And I don't know of many people that would write those kind of messages if they had nothing to do with it. They're kind of curious messages. But, you know, my take is it's pretty clear law enforcement never forgot about this little girl and her family. And we're all grateful for that. The sheriff's office just never gave up, and they kept on it. And it's pretty clear where their focus is now, and it's kind of out there in the public sphere. But I'm also hearing some pressure of why haven't they charged them yet, and you know, that kind of thing. That you know, they've got more than enough evidence, charge them and lock them up, and that's what Andy was talking about. But there's a lot of danger there for the DA if you charge too early, and you don't have enough evidence, and you go to trial, and they are acquitted, then you can't charge them again if you later find more evidence. So the Fifth Amendment double jeopardy clause comes in. We've read a lot about lie detectors and their results. Well, lie detectors are not admissible evidence in North Carolina, so that can't come in. And the other big challenge I see for the district attorney is nobody has been found. It's awfully hard to prove a murder case whenever you don't have a body. You're going to have to convince a jury that there was a murder in the first place when we don't have the answers. And it's hard for the DA.
There are a few examples where with purely circumstantial evidence and no body, there have been convictions.
There have been.
If it's overwhelming circumstantial
Well, that's
evidence.
the problem. It's going to have to be so overwhelming.
It's gotta be
overwhelming.
And we're not there yet.
Yep, and we all remember the O.J. Simpson trial from 30 years ago. Knowing that a person is guilty and having a lot of evidence and convincing a jury of that is two different things.
Two different things. Well, Scott, this is quite the subject for you to have to talk about first, but it has been a case I know you've followed for the 25 years off and on like all of us. What do you think all this latest development means?
Well, you know, really, it would be really nice for it to be like a TV drama that it only lasts an hour and you find out who in the world's guilty by the 60-minute mark. But this has been over 25 years of investigation and, you know, trying to get it right and everything else. And my heart does go out to the Degree family that they want to have closure. They want to know actually what happened. And I know they're grasping on to make sure that, hey, hopefully she's out there somewhere alive. But once again, you got to do your due diligence. You've got to let all law enforcement to take care of all of the things and turn over every stone. And my hat's off to the Sheriff's Department, the FBI, and those that have been investigating this, and that we get it right. Because, you know, there's many times that you convict somebody wrongfully. And we want to make sure that we get that right. But my heart goes out to the Degree family because it's been an awfully long time not knowing what happened to their precious daughter.
Well, it's a sad case. I mean, there are a lot of elements here, but just for those that may not be keeping up much, the DNA that was found in the handbag or the book bag that was found in Burke County a year and a half after she disappeared, eventually they were able, the law enforcement were not too long ago with increases in technology, there apparently was DNA from Anna Lee Dedman and from a gentleman whose last name was Underhill, who worked for the Dedman family, and he's been deceased since 2004. I remember when this came out, Andy, last fall, that the lawyer for Mr. Dedman made the statement that it may be that the only person who really knows what happened is deceased.
Well, and that very well could be, Mike, but there are some other people that I think know it too. But the problem is trying to get it out of whoever else might know. And I think people need to realize, I know there's a lot of people that are in a rush to judgment. They want to see it at the end. But here's the thing people need to realize. Yes, I mean, there is circumstantial evidence out there, and it's slowly building. But if I'm sitting there and I'm Mike Miller, does he really want to rush a case that could go out there and blow up in his face, and then he ends up with just a piece of a case?
No, and that's why there hadn't been an arrest.
That's exactly right. I mean, and I would caution the public out there, Folks, let's let them do their job. Let them slowly build the case to where it is airtight. And they're not, Mike Miller is an excellent DA. He is not going to go out here and go half-cocked on something. And I refuse to believe that Alan Norman is going to bring something to the DA unless he has got it all together. Because, Mike, just like you said many times, if this thing finally comes to fruition, there is going to be so many TV trucks around the courthouse, it's going to be, wherever they end up going, it's going to be unbelievable.
If there's ever a conviction, Scott, there will be a TV drama.
And you know, what is ever done in the darkness will always be brought out into the light. And I really sort of believe that, hey, they're trying to really build their case so that maybe they get somebody to come up with a confession that, hey, it was an accident and they tried to hide it. But, you know, if you start heaping things upon, you know, people that are involved, maybe you get somebody that says, hey, you know, it's really eating on me for the last 25 years. I'm going to come forth and tell the truth.
But the question I've got is, Mike, and you and I have talked about this, where are they going to have a venue where whoever might be charged can get a fair trial?
Well, it'll be a venue outside of Cleveland County. I think we can safely say the venue will be changed if there is a trial.
It's probably going to be somewhere like Greene County or somewhere out past Patank, somewhere so far away that nobody really knows much about it.
Other than the few national blurbs through the years that people probably forgot. Roger, anything further?
Well, just, you know, Andy mentioned an airtight case. The DA, if you know, I've never been a DA and didn't go to law school, of course, but if I've got a case that I feel 50% confident, I don't charge. If I feel 60%, now I'm getting closer. I don't know that you get to where it's airtight. You know, that may be too high a standard, but you've got to get to the point where you have a high degree of confidence that you can convict a jury. But again, I think back about the W.H. Simpson trial, there was a ton of evidence, and still the jury said not guilty.
Well, you want to get enough evidence that you believe you have a good chance of getting 12 people to agree that there's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that there was a murder in the first place. That's
What,
extra burden.
whatever reasonable doubt means.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, folks, we're going to go to break a minute or two early, but we would all encourage you to let law enforcement, that's the Sheriff's Department, it's the SBI, it's the FBI, they're all working on this case. You can bet they have more than they've released. You know, they didn't release everything they have.
We'll show all your cards.
They subpoenaed cell phones last week, but be patient, let them do their job, and let's see where this goes. But it is a fairly big development this week. When we come back on the second half of Political Smackdown, we're going to talk about how much money and where did it come from that was spent to elect people statewide in North Carolina last year. Welcome back to the second half of our show this week. Well, the numbers are in on where the money came from to elect the governor and the other 9 Council of State seats, and actually where a lot of the money that went into that Supreme Court race that is still technically undecided in North Carolina in 2024. Perhaps one of the more interesting things is how much of the money came from North Carolinians and how much came from out of state. And it's also always interesting to see who are the people that gave the really big money to the parties and the PACs. It's limited what you can give to an individual, but not to certain types of PACs.
That's right.
And so We know one thing for sure. Democrats spent a lot more and raised a lot more money than Republicans. But one of the more interesting things about that is Democrats raised about $5.4 million from individual donors for these races, and 78.5%, $4.2 million of it came from outside of North Carolina. Only 21.5%, or about $1 million, came from in-state donors. By contrast, Republicans raised $1.5 million less from individual donors at 3.9, but nearly 72% of it came from people that live in North Carolina. So it's just basically the opposite of the Democrats. And there are other facts we may get into, but Roger, you get us started. What do you make of, while the Democrats did raise a lot more, they didn't do too well inside their own state?
Well, we all know the old saying, money is the mother's milk of politics, and you got to have money. 70% of the individual contributions to the Republicans came from in-state, and 70% Democrats came from out of state. Now, Mike, I think your basic question is this: why are Democrats more successful raising money out of state than Republicans? And I think that may be the key question here, and it may have to do with the quality of the state candidates that the Republican Party nominated last year. You know, when we look at the candidate the Republicans put up for lieutenant governor and attorney general and that crazy woman for state superintendent, and Lord have mercy, Mark Robinson, what a gift to the Democratic Party. I can see why Republicans outside North Carolina were looking at that and say, well, I'm not going to give money to those clowns. But, you know, the Democrats have been successful in raising money out of state, and the Republicans haven't.
I won't dispute there might be an element of truth in what you said, but there's also at least about one of those candidates.
Yeah.
But
One?
well, I don't think your superintendent of education was much better than ours.
Oh,
Oh,
Lord
yeah,
have mercy.
that wasn't a bit
I
of
don't-
it. Oh, no.
Well, he's a socialist, for starters.
Well, at least he wasn't a nut.
And he didn't win by much with all of that, if y'all
A
remember.
win's a win.
I know, he barely won. But anyway, another point could be made is that North Carolina was a swing state. You knew you were going to have large Republican majorities in the legislature.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was a big effort to make sure they kept the governor, to make sure they at least had a chance at veto. And by the skin of their teeth, right now they have one vote that keeps vetoes from being overridden when that time comes. And it's coming. May and June are coming.
And we'll pay that one off.
Yep.
You know, to be able to switch over.
Scott, what's your take on the fact that Democrats just don't seem to be able to raise money in their own state?
Well, obviously the state's really flip-flopped, and it's really kind of, to me, an anomaly that, you know, Council of State positions are Democrat, and then you've got the General Assembly Republican, you know, majority, and again, we did miss the supermajority by that one vote, but you know, I think it's sort of very appropriate because you take Bloomberg, who gave millions of dollars in the North Carolina races, that you know, they look at North Carolina as being one of those swing states, and I think it was a matter of trying to get someone elected nationwide, and so they were going to support Democratic opponents throughout the state to try to see if they couldn't swing North Carolina.
Well, they won 5 council of state seats, and Republicans won 5 council of state seats, but they won the big one, the governor's office, and attorney general, the second big one. What's your take on the contributions and how they came down?
Money flows to power, Mike. Always has, always will. And would you really want to take a chance on ticking off somebody like the Speaker of the House or the President Pro Tem? Now, I think if you go back and look, probably Stein and the AG probably got their share of the money statewide, but the money it tends to flow, the bulk that goes to General Assembly races, tends to come from out of state. It was like that when I was there. I mean, we always were able to raise money out of state. It always flowed through the state party, and it's just the way it was, because we could raise money out of state a lot easier because they usually had a plan that came out of the DNC about a nationwide plan of how to work to take control or hold general assemblies. And that's just how the money came.
About those big people. I bet me and you couldn't have got this done. Josh Stein's parents contributed $570,000.
Fancy that.
And the John Saul family that owns SAS Institute in Cary gave Democrats $4.5 million to the party, and other PACs, I guess. But
And we do appreciate it.
Josh Stein himself transferred $13 million to the state party that came to him. Of the total $42 million raised, $18 million was directed through the party, helping Democrats pass Republicans in funds raised. Not to mention, a lot of that money went to the AG, the Education, and the Supreme Court. Remember, there were three on that Council of State they didn't give any money from. One of them was for treasurer, and one was for auditor, if I remember.
Yep.
And those are two I remember, and of course they didn't win.
And agriculture, I think, was the other.
Well, Troxler, that's
Yep.
given on Troxler,
Yep.
I guess, because he's been an institution.
And Elaine Marshall.
Well, she's gonna win regardless.
She was going to win regardless, probably. Well, it's an interesting thing to see where money comes from and where it goes in North Carolina politics. Well, it's getting that time of year again. The General Assembly is back in session. They have just come out with projections, and there's going to be a $544 million more or less surplus, unless they get a big number at April 15th they're not expecting, which is about 1.6% more than their 34 point whatever billion dollar budget. So it's not a huge surplus, but it is a surplus. Governor Stein came out this week and warned that you've got tax cuts still in there if we meet certain things, and next year, the fiscal year that starts a year from July, they're not expecting hardly any surplus according to current projections. So he's warning them that they need to do more for public education now and more for Alene and all of that. Andy, I swan it seems like I've been hearing this rhyme from the Democrats since 2011 when the Republicans took over and started lowering taxes. They kept saying, you keep lowering taxes, we're going to fall off the cliff, but we haven't. So are the Democrats still crying wolf, or do they have a point this time?
Well, I think they have a point, because look at all the problems we've had trying to fund all that repair in western North Carolina. I mean, we have barely scratched the surface with that. I'm really surprised that we've got any kind of surplus, really. I mean, even if we put every nickel of that into it, we still aren't going to touch it. I mean, even with the feds coming in with matching funds.
Well, I think the surplus comes from the budget last year, not from the emergency fund they've taken out of. I think the 544 is just on the budget before Helene.
That's revenue income.
But
extra
still, I mean, when you start thinking about it, you still have, the problem you have is when you've had your economy in that western end of the state that basically went into the dumpster. They missed their whole fall with the leaf peepers and all that stuff. I mean, they lost their whole economy last year.
Yeah, that part of the state suffered on sales tax, and I wonder how high the non-collected property tax rate is in western
It's
North
awful,
Carolina
I'm sure.
right now. Well, Scott, the Democrats have hollered for 15 years nearly now, 14 years, about Republicans are cutting taxes and we're not going to be able to balance the budget, but they've had the biggest surpluses in recent history since they've had control.
Well, I really do believe the formula is working. And I think the future for North Carolina is bright as far as economic development is concerned, because obviously from the nationwide down, you know, we've got a pro-business attitude. You know, I foresee the energy prices going down, you know, because I believe the pipeline will get a go this time, which really I think sent the inflation rate really sky high because of that. It started the movement in that situation. So I think the formula really works, that lowering taxes and being very attractive for businesses to come into North Carolina and do it will just do nothing but help our economy and really get us boosted forward. And I think we're going to continue to have surpluses. Now there are things on the horizon that are, you know, kind of a bugaboo. You know, we've already talked about Hurricane Helene. But also the state retirement system. That's going to be something that's going to have to be taken care of, because it's really taking a big burden on those that have retired, and the money's not coming in. And so far they've passed it on to like municipalities and governmental entities to be able to I guess, contribute more in that case. But again, there are some things on the horizon we'll have to be careful of. But I'm bullish on North Carolina, and I think we'll continue to have those surpluses from here on out.
Well, let me correct something I said. The 25-26 forecast that they had came out this past week just predicts a 0.5% of growth for next year and predicts a 2.4% drop, Andy, in 26-27. And that's the basis of Stein's, quote, warning right now. But you do remember that the Republicans have to meet certain revenue goals for those future tax rate cuts in income tax to continue to come down. Yeah. So hopefully they'll do that. All right, well, we're going to go to the lightning round. Roger, you want to get us started?
We all got our new Cleveland County property tax appraisals in the mail this week. Holy inflation, Batman. Mine went up 49% since 4 years ago on the appraisal. I think most appraisals were up, from what I hear at church and places, about 50 or 60%. I did have one friend in Lattimore. She said hers went up 99%. But you know, let's not get mad at the county commissioners, quite honestly. And we do understand the county commissioners had nothing to do with the appraisal value. That's not what they do. But they do set the tax rates. I expect a tax increase. I understand that. Just like the cost of everything in our home has gone up, the prices county commissioners got to pay to maintain their buildings and attract quality employees, those prices have gone up, so we'll look for a tax increase. But we're not looking for a tax increase of 50 or 60%. So commissioners, we're watching you.
Well, the ones that went up double and more, and there are a lot of them, they're going to get that kind of tax increase unless they successfully appeal.
Right.
Because they can't lower the rate but so much
right.
to what's called revenue on the average.
Yep.
And you're at 49, the average was 57, but a big part of that, the several I own in Kings Mountain along with my wife, they went up an average of 68%.
So we're more valuable.
And these are
we're
old.
more valuable.
Well, you have two things driving it, the casino and Albemarle. That's the two big things that have driven a lot of property values. Andy, what you got?
Something funny, Mike.
All right.
The world's oldest known wild bird had laid an egg this week. Named Wisdom, that lives in Hawaii. It is a Lasian albatross. Lives in a wildlife refuge in Hawaii. For the oldest known bird. And isn't that something? There is hope for all of us that can lay an egg at that age.
Scott?
That's wonderful. Well, we lost two great people in Kings Mountain this week. Earlier in the week, Ellis Noel passed away. You may remember him for being on the Kings Mountain Christmas Parade this year on C-19. He was the executive director of the Tourism Development Authority for Kings Mountain. I always loved Kings Mountain. Was a special events person back in the day. We lost a giant in Ellis Noel this week. Also, Lib Stewart, who was the editor and writer for the Kings Mountain Herald in a time, when local newspapers are very relevant because they don't make the large newspapers. And Kings Mountain Herald still relevant because it does stick to the local area. So Lib Stewart passed away as well. Just a real stalwart. I think she was born at the Kings Mountain Herald and served for probably over 45 to 50 years.
Well, I'm going to be critical of President Trump. Don't you Democrats faint?
I will try my best.
The president's, and I'm quoting from Peggy Noonan in her article out today, the president's remarks on Ukraine this week were destructive. He isn't wrong to wish to end that war. It's brutal and it's wasted a lot of lives. But Ukraine did not start the war. Russia did in defiance of international law. This is not Zelensky, the prime minister's fault. He's not a dictator. He's not loathed by his people. And the vast majority of those listening to the president make these charges know these charges are not true. People have asked, why does Trump do some of these things? I can't answer that question. That's why I've said I probably agree with him 75 or 80% of the time. But when he's wrong, and he needs to change his attitude toward Ukraine. See you next week.